Hello and welcome to Cine Treats the podcast. This podcast is going along with the other one and is called A Night at the Movies. The other podcast, All Seats Considered, is going to be more of a discussionary podcast. This one is going to be picking something strictly film, going through it and picking it apart and saying, this is why you should go watch it. It's good for this, it's good for that. These parts are kind of but, nothing's perfect. And we're just going to have a lot of fun with it that way. So, we are starting off with our first official one with Good Omens. I'm here with Beth.
Hi.
And my angel mug, and we're going to get this thing rolling. It's a 6-part miniseries, and I say this to be emphatically clear to everyone who's listening. This is a mini series, not season. It goes through the book, and that's it. There's no season 2.
If there is anything coming out in the future, it's not going to be in the same setup as the miniseries that was released.
There have been rumors and stuff like that of a sequel, and even Terry and Neil had been thinking about doing a sequel. They even had a name picked out for it. I don't remember what it is. It's not very important because it never made it off the cutting room floor. But on that lines, it never made it off the cutting room floor. Everything that would be said was said, and that's all that needed to be done. So I figured it would be best if we just start at the beginning, which in this case is not the beginning of the miniseries, because Good Omens has quite a lot of history that should definitely be addressed at least a little bit, because it makes a difference when you know why certain things were done, why certain decisions were made, if you know at least a little bit of the background behind this miniseries and why it's so important. Sir Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman were friends for a very, very long time. Not a very, very long time, not 6,000 years time, but a long time. And in writing this book, I'm getting emotional. They wrote this book together. It was because if you're a writer, you know that every book is like your child. It's a little bit of your soul that you give out into the world and you share with other people. And that's exactly what this was. They had talked about doing something with it for years, but they hadn't been able to get an actual visual production off the ground. And it started as a movie, and they couldn't get there. And I'm gonna say, and then Sir Terry Pratchett got sick. He'd been sick. You can't just
You don't develop Alzheimer's
but
like pneumonia. Calm down with Alzheimer's.
And I'm not making fun of that in any particular way. I'm just saying that my brain, it wasn't a sudden thing, but the deterioration was. And from personal experience, I know how that feels, where you know that somebody's sick and they've been fighting for years, and it just doesn't feel like the worst is going to happen. And, you tell yourself, I've got months, I've got years.
We've got time. Until you don't.
And that's what happened with Good Omens. Terry sent Neil. It's the first time that he asked him of anything. And for Neil Gaiman to say this is the first time that he had asked, that Terry Pratchett had ever asked him to do anything. I know with my friends, I ask them to do stuff all the time. And it's not like, oh, go get me a glass of water or something like that. It'll be important things. It'll be stuff that matters and things and stuff. But for them, they were two very independent and sometimes bullheaded. Very stern in the beliefs. And it was about Good Omens. Terry Pratchett wanted Neil Gaiman to write the script. He wanted him to be involved. He wanted for him to bring Good Omens to life. And he said that he knows that he doesn't have time to do it. He doesn't have time in his schedule.
Right. That Neil's a very busy man. He's got all kinds of stuff that he's always up to. You don't have the time, but please.
You're the only one that can do the old girl justice. He's the only other human on the planet that understands Good Omens as much as Terry Pratchett did. And Neil's like, well, when you put it that way,
How do I say no to that? You don't say no to that.
And he started writing the script, and it wasn't like going anywhere fast, and he's like, Terry Pratchett wanted to see it. Like, one of the last conversations they had was that he wanted Neil Gaiman to make it so that he'd be able to see it made into what they had talked about for years. And they had a problem getting it off the ground. Even when they went, we're going to make this a show. And Neil had started writing some of the episodes. And within 6 months, Sir Terry Pratchett went from being able to hold a conversation and be mostly himself to passed away. And that loss really put the project into gear.
You would think that could have killed it.
Because the co-writer of the original source material, who is the best friend of the other co-writer who's writing the script, Neil could have just easily gone full grief mode and not done it, but he made a promise, and he went, I'm doing it, and I'm going to do it right, and it's going to be Terry. I'm going to do it for Terry, and something that Terry would be proud of. If you know anything about these two people, and we will talk about this later, yes, he did. This is a beautiful adaptation and homage to a work that
they spent so much time and so much of themselves making and putting together stitch by stitch and breathing life into. Neil has taken that step further in a way that I really do think, and a lot of people think, that Terry would have been pleased with.
That is the kind of mindset that went into this project, is making something that not only does the book justice, but is a great memorial to a great writer. First person on the project was Michael Sheen. Him and Neil have been friends for a while now, and Good Omens is one of Michael Sheen's favorite books. And he wasn't sure what he wanted to do or who he was going to be. All he knew was like, I want to be involved in this. I don't know if you could say next on board, because by that point, I believe that Neil Gaiman had Amazon behind him. But David Tennant, in Neil Gaiman's mind, playing Crowley, long before David Tennant was asked to play Crowley.
I think Neil said episode 3. He was writing episode 3,
episode 3 with the church scene.
And he immediately had, in his mind's eye, Michael Sheen and David Tennant.
Because who else would be able to hop down the aisle of a church?
Toward Nazis.
Not just hop down towards Nazis. Like the whole conversation, trying to be suave and going, ooh, ah. And I loved it. It was great. Because in this version of Good Omens, Good Omens is always about Aziraphale and Crowley's relationship. Like that is what the story is. And also there's Armageddon and end of the world stuff and whatever's. And they're involved in that, absolutely, but it's not revolved around Armageddon per se.
Right. I would say that the relationship, however you want to see that, between Aziraphale and Crowley is always a big facet of the medium. You just have a dial underneath it and you kind of turn it up or down depending on what you're watching and listening to. And
with that, I'm going to go back to the beginning. Because, we did go to the beginning, but now we're going to the beginning of the miniseries, even though we've been talking about episode 3. So, we're going to go back to episode 1. the very first thing you see is war. And then it turns out to be mourning.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious. Yeah. I love that so much. I can't really say it's an homage because it is British entertainment. But if you have ever seen any type of British entertainment, this intro is like Monty Python skit.
Doctor Who.
Even Fry and Laurie a little bit. A bit of Fry and Laurie. And the narrator is not only God, but is a woman, which is fantastic. Because everyone always assumes he. God would be more of a it or them or something like that.
Yes.
When you are doing an adaptation where it's either visual or audio, you usually gotta pick one. Especially with the voice. Because it's really hard to...
The most important part would be, can they read the part? Mm-hmm. After that, it wouldn't really matter him or her, what their pronouns are. It doesn't matter.
That was one thing that I knew that people blew up over, is that God was a woman. And then, immediately after that, not really giving anybody time to breathe, Adam and Eve are Caucasian! What has the world come to? Other than, all of the, scientists and research, and it's Africa, and people pitched a fit. I remember saying out loud to my television, "Good on you!" Anyway, it establishes very early on that Aziraphale is not 100% devout as the other angels are, but he still is very, intrinsically, this is what's going on, this is what's happening, this is the plan, technically. And Crowley very quickly establishes that he's not necessarily down with anything that his side has going on. He's just doing what he's told, and that's about it. He doesn't really have any loyalties, which is very interesting for right off the bat, because this is really close to them falling, and for him to have been fallen but have no real ties to anything that was going on. And then you have Aziraphale, who is, I'm an angel. I must do angel things, and angel words are angely, and I'm an angel. Which is then preceded by, didn't you have a flaming sword? No, he is big and flamey and fiery and
flaming like anything.
And he just gave it to them because he felt bad that they were being kicked out, and there's, nasty, snarly beasts, and they don't have anything but the leaves on their back, and
her with baby on the way.
Right, she's already expecting... He is trying to put it in a way so that he doesn't have to admit that he did something that he's not supposed to do.
I mean, he would also probably excuse it with, nobody told him not to give them the sword.
This is very true. And later on we see God going, "Where did your sword go?" He's like, must have dropped it somewhere. I'd lose my own head next. And then God didn't ask about it ever again.
Just letting him know that she knew.
And she didn't do anything to him. She didn't smite him or anything like that. She's just, I know what you did. In the book, they draw more attention to the fact that angels and demons don't have free will.
Yeah.
And in the miniseries, they don't focus on that quite so much. And I kind of like that better. Because they still say that, genetically, bunny ears, that they're not supposed to go against this sort of thing. They're not supposed to go against this sort of grain. It is in their DNA.
If they have DNA.
If they have DNA, that this is the way they act, this is the way, what they are looking for, what they're searching for, this is what they are, this is who they are, and you don't go against that. You can't. And Aziraphale and Crowley do, through a creative shenanigans.
Right. It's thought to be that it's a combination of them spending so much time with humanity And because of that, having developed the capacity for imagination and circular thinking, that Crowley has an enormous capacity for imagination, and that Aziraphale can critically think his way out of almost any box.
Sometimes to a fault. This scene, before we move forward into present time in the miniseries, this scene, the scene where, Aziraphale's like, I don't trust you, you're a demon. And then it starts to rain and he puts his wing over Crowley, and Crowley kind of scooches underneath it. That was the thing that really lit the flames of where their relationship stands as far as the miniseries is concerned. And you better believe we're going to talk about it later. And the transpirings of the baby swap. He gets the Antichrist. He's the one that's supposed to deliver the Antichrist. And Aziraphale is having his sushi, and he gets word from Gabriel that things are happening. And the thing that immediately that both of them think is, dang it! They've been on Earth for so long, and they've been mingling for so long, and both of them know it's gonna happen. Both of them know it's roundabouts the time that's gonna happen. But it's still like, oh God, it's happening.
All right, you think you've at least got one more day. You've at least got one more day, and on repeat until you're out of days. I wanted to go back though. You mentioned at the sushi restaurant and Gabriel telling Aziraphale, it's on. I love hating Gabriel, and it's really refreshing too because he wasn't really in the book.
He was mentioned in the book a little bit, and one of the things that Terry and Neil had wanted to do with one of the later whatevers was expand more on the angels, because you got to see a significant amount of like demon muckery in the book, but they didn't really touch on the angels too terribly much. They were mentioned haphazardly, mostly Gabriel because he's him.
And they've got a brilliant actor to play him.
I know. John Hamm.
I'm gonna need you to shut up and die now.
Holding the coffee.
Like I can see him doing that. He's got that big cheesy smile and the what are you talking about? Do your job kind of thing. And I'm sure a lot of us have had bosses like that or supervisors like that you fantasize about hitting with a pickaxe.
Like, they have no idea what's going on. They're just, like, totally enraptured in what corporate has told them to do. Yeah. That actually ties into the normal man.
He means Norman.
Oh, God. What the scene we're talking about is when Gabriel and his secretary comes into Aziraphale's bookshop and is like, I would like to purchase one of your material possessions. Pornography. Ah, yes! I want to purchase some pornography in your back room because I am embarrassed. And there's
human beings prefer to purchase their pornography
in private. And there's a guy in the shop and he's looking at him like, oh. And they get back there and Gabriel's like, nailed it! Ah, humans are so stupid. And Aziraphale's like, yeah, you nailed it. Good job. Good job. Okay, what do you want? And, the whole time they're talking, just the more that you see and hear Gabriel, the more that is what he comes off as, is that kind of boss that loves the power he has, and he loves the plan they've got set in motion, and it doesn't matter about anything else that's going on as long as they get to the end goal that he wants to have. Yeah. Later, we meet Adam. And the whole point of this is, the whole prompting question is, what if the Antichrist was actually a good kid, like a nice guy? So you've got Adam, who seems fairly normal-ish, and he's got his 3 friends. This is the first time that we get to see him, grown up. And he starts, talking about his birthday and what he wants and everything like that. And his birthday is supposed to be a big deal because that's when the Hellhound comes out and that's the start of Armageddon. And you're like, that's the big deal. And at this point, we realized that, and by we, I mean Aziraphale and Crowley, realized that they don't have the right kid. And it's because of the Hellhound. And the first time that we really get to see Adam is in this part. He names the dog Dog. And if that's not human, I don't know what is.
Well, somebody online, and probably several somebodies by now, is pointing out that might be a demonic thing, considering that Crowley calls his angel Angel.
At the same time, he doesn't have anything else to call him.
He has a name.
Yes, he does, but when he does use it, it's... But also, if we've learned anything about humans, is we're not terribly creative in the naming department.
That's true. The river called River.
We've got river, mountain, desert.
We have so many deserts.
We have so many deserts. The next thing that we get to see, other than Gabriel continuing to be rather insufferable, is the Four Horsemen. We start getting introduced to the Four Horsemen, which they make a point of saying that they're outsourced. And they've been around for a long time, so they've been doing what Aziraphale and Crowley have been doing, which is getting modernized.
War being a war correspondent. Ha! Famine, who it states in the book, and they show this in the miniseries, revels in, especially the rich and elite, basically starving themselves in the name of, I'm eating at a high-priced restaurant. But he takes that a step further in creating a artificial food. And in the miniseries, they call it chow.
Which is hilarious because Hoster, when he gives Crowley the Antichrist, He says chow, and he's like, it's Italian, I think it means food.
Yeah.
And later on, it means food, and I'm just like,
It's very, very enjoyable, that whole bit. Interesting cameo during that diner scene, too.
Yay.
If you know where to look. Pestilence isn't just, for example, locusts. It's disease in general.
Mm-hmm.
Sometime after the AIDS epidemic, when the numbers were starting to be overturned and people were recovering, is when Pestilence retired and pollution kind of oozed into his place. They did a beautiful job. I really like all the choices, both in the book and in the miniseries that they did with the Horsemen. It's a very pivotal bit, with one exception. And it makes me sad because it's the one that I wanted the most. I was not terribly happy once the voice and the face of death were revealed.
I can forgive it a little bit.
I like
the
physical acting.
Part of it is that if you read Terry Pratchett specifically, it's not the same. It's not supposed to be the same death per se.
It's not the exact.
It's not the exact same death. I will say that in his conclusion, like him, because
death resolving.
This death resolving. Excellent. Because every time he's on screen, I would switch between I hate this and I love this. And I have no idea where the tally marks were by the end, but the second to last time you see death, I'm like, okay, alright, I feel much better about this. At this point, we get to episode 3, which we've already talked about a little bit. And this is where we really kind of start going into why their relationship is the way that it is, and we've got all of these interwoven stories. Now the needle and thread is starting to be pulled, so all those scenes come together. At this point, we know what's going on with Newton, and he's met up with Witchfinders, and Anathema is already in Tadfield, doing her witchy occult things. And they're all starting to overlap with each other. Like, Newton is finding out that Tadfields had, weather anomalies and weird things and stuff that would be described as like a child's fantasy has been like that for the past 11 years. Anthema has given Adam, material to read and is, feeding into his curiosities. And, she's there because she's supposed to help with the end of the world. But she has no idea how she's going to do this. She's already met Aziraphale and Crowley. Now, we see that Agnes Nutter is at the core of a lot of this. And if you know the book, it says
the nice and accurate prophecies of Agnes Nutter, witch.
And she's kind of at the core of all this, because she's the only one that's been able to be 100% accurate in anything that she does. But the problem is that she's usually very cryptic and terribly specific with every single thing that she says.
Nice and accurate is not a, embellishment. She's very, very, very accurate, and that's a bit of a problem.
Yeah. So, and it was really important for Neil to keep Agnes in there, and importantly because she's Terry Pratchett's.
Yeah.
If there is one thing that I do love about the whole Witchfinder everything, because may nothing strike me down in breathing this out loud, the Witchfinder everything was I didn't care for it. Agnes aside, and I don't know how you could just kind of like justify her being in there if you didn't have that whole plot line, but whenever I started to get kind of it was usually during those parts.
The Witchfinder.
Is the Witchfinder,
and
Shadwell and all that stuff. And I don't have a problem with the characters, and it's something that I noticed, especially the further along that I got. And it's not strictly because Aziraphale and Crowley were not on the screen, because I enjoyed other things when they're not on the screen. And just specifically
the Witchfinder army.
Yes, is that
I wasn't bothered as much by it. I think partially because a lot of the parts that I enjoyed very passively were bits where I had seen something like it in my mind's eye when reading the book, and now I'm seeing it on screen, and it's matching up so well that I'm having one of those moments where I'm gone again. I'm living it, not just watching it, instead of living it instead of reading it. So, because it was still so, I don't know how to put that. It was nice and accurate. I was so caught up in that it didn't really, that bit didn't really bother me. The bits that bothered me were when I was kind of jarred out of that.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that Shadwell and Madame Tracy, while important pivotal characters, are probably the least pivotal characters of the main cast.
Especially,
they have their place, but they aren't. They're one of those examples where change can be brought about by just your simple, average, everyday people, but it wasn't as graceful as other examples in even just this book. And things don't have to be graceful. They can be messy sometimes too.
Moving right along, there is something that they do talk about in the book, and they bring attention to it. But seeing it on the screen, I really, really liked, is that Crowley is not at peace with the fact that he's fallen. And we were talking earlier that he, from the get-go, from the first time we see him, he's not acting like you would think a typical demon would act. And he's already not on the same level of mindset as literally anyone else we see from hell. First he says, I was just hanging out with the wrong crowd. And then, the next thing that we see that really kind of pushes that home is the fact that he is helping Aziraphale, and then ends up lying profusely while he's helping Aziraphale. He is constantly doing things that Aziraphale considers nice, and Crowley insists that they're not. At this point in the miniseries, we get him on his absolutely ridiculous chair, pleading up to God. He says all it took in the old days to be a demon was asking questions. And he clarifies that all he did was ask a question, and that's what is the divine plan? What is going on? What is going on, God? This is the moment where you go, he's a demon that has faith in God. And ironically, the camera is panned upwards when he does this.
So you're looking down into his face as he stares upward.
And when
shot.
that moment where Aziraphale finally, he cracks and realizes that no one is going to help him. No one cares.
He's the only one on his side who thinks that this is somehow wrong.
That, we're supposed to protect humans. And that even the voice of God is like, it's war. Same thing. Aziraphale is looking up and the camera is pointed downwards. And these two have that same character revelation in opposite directions.
I will say that because Neil was so involved, he wrote the screenplay and he's wrote screenplays before. Because he helped with a little bit of everything on the set. Most of what he does ends up being a visual medium. He does so much graphic novel. You can see so many scenes that you take a picture, you have a still, that look like they could be a box on a page of a graphic novel. You look at it going, this could be a comic book, this could be a graphic novel. This is the same kind of posture and pose and telling more in that picture than you can with words. And that is exactly what I got out of those scenes is this is totally something he would have had them draw out.
Here is where we're gonna break off into our question segment, because our question segment actually covers a bit of the last 2 episodes. And this segment is called Food for Thought. Every episode we're going to sit down and look at some questions from the fandom to just kind of drum up conversation and address some things that people are curious about or wondering about, and just generally, stuff. First question that we're going to talk about is, what books of the authors would you suggest others read if they liked the miniseries Good Omens? And have they worked on anything else in a collaboration capacity?
I've read a lot from both Terry and Neil, and with Neil, it really depends on your age group as well. He writes for everybody, and I wouldn't say that you couldn't enjoy some of his works that feel targeted toward a younger audience as an adult, because I've read almost everything he's ever written that I can get my hands on, and even the stuff that feels targeted toward children, I still really, really enjoy as an adult. But if you wanted to find something that felt somewhat close to Good Omens, the biggest, most obvious ones are his Sandman series. It is a bit darker, very graphic, and not just because it's a graphic novel. It's there's a lot of violence.
It gets intense.
It can get very intense. And this one, I'll say, I haven't actually gotten around to reading it yet, but I have friends who have, I have family who have, and I've heard so many good things about it. I just got to get around to it. Is the American Gods series. I love the idea of the evolution and adaptation of gods and demigods and deities of different cultures having to kind of keep up with the times. When you're a immortal being and humans are just so fast to develop once they got going, there's just you gotta kind of pick up the pace.
Yeah.
So I've heard a lot of good things about it, and it's also got a series. And after I get some books under my belt, I'd like to go and watch the series too. But the Sandman graphic novels is what I started with him. It's what I grew up on, and that was probably inappropriate for my age range, but. He does have a lot of things targeted toward younger readers. I would say in relation to Good Omens, I would say Odd and the Frost Giants.
Yeah.
It's a Norse mythology kind of story. If you've heard anything about Terry Pratchett, you have to have heard of his Discworld novels. There's about 1 billion of them.
It's a biggie. It's a biggie.
And for me, the best part of the Discworld series is he has different books focused on different prominent characters. You've got some that are guards in the major town. You've got some about witches, very much like Anthema and Agnes. Mm-hmm. You've got some about wizards in their university. You've got, good lord, there's so many. And so if you pick up one and you find yourself not getting into it as much, find one that's on a different set of characters and try that one, because it may just be can't empathize as much with that set of main characters, but you will with this other one. We did this with a couple of our friends, actually, where they were kind of about one, and then we found the right one. Mm-hmm. And then they've read everything around those characters that he's written. He does have some other things. There's Only You Can Save Mankind. There's the Bromulad trilogy. There's the Carpet People. He does have other works that are outside of the Disc. But the Discworld was an amazing place, and was also the first introduction to Terry Pratchett that I had.
I will say that I don't think they've done another book together.
I don't think so. I did a little digging, thinking on that question, and they've done a lot together in person in places. They've done radio shows, talk shows, and they've done guest appearances and book signings and all kinds of things together. But I can't find another piece that they collaborated on other than Good Omens. Now, they collaborated on that in a bunch of different ways. They've tried multiple times to get it onto the screen. They worked together with getting it to radio. And they worked together on kicking ideas back and forth, like you said earlier, about a subsequent book. Another fun bit of trivia, I don't think they had anything to do with this, though. There's been a stage play adaptation.
Yes, there has. I saw that and I went, that's fascinating. All right, question number 2. What is your opinion on Aziraphale and Crowley's relationship? And, because I think these questions kind of go hand in hand with each other, at least for me anyway, what would you consider the core theme of the book to be? In my opinion, I think the core theme of the book is that love can conquer all things, no matter how impossible it may seem. And I say this because people are not used to the idea of different types of love. Like, Adam defeats the apocalypse with the love of his friends, the love of Earth, his father, his actual, human father. That is how he defeats Satan. And you've got Anthema, which is bridging two worlds that should not typically be bridged.
Star-crossed, I think they call it. Mm. You could even say that there's a certain amount of love of one's job involved with the Horsemen. They're very excited to get together and get things going, and very into that. And there is a sense of camaraderie. There's a sense of, yes, we're finally back together again when they see each other.
If they were bringing about the end of the world, it would have been nice.
Even in the miniseries, in the diner, the first thing that War and Famine do is hug. They're completely platonic. They're absolutely just more like coworkers than anything else. But they're just so happy to be working together again. This is good. There's so many different flavors of love in this book.
And none of them are the same, and technically none of them are just straight black and white, this is what this is what that is, because all of them are odd in some capacity. The question specifically about Aziraphale and Crowley's relationship, I will say a few things before I go into me mode. One is that their relationship is very different.
The way it can be interpreted, and the way it is, the way it is exposed to the consumer. It's not necessarily that it at its core is different, but what you are shown of it is different.
Okay. 2, Neil Gaiman has gone on record stating that Aziraphale and Crowley do love each other. Someone has posed the question, are they gay? And he has, responded, they're angels. They don't work like that. They're celestial beings. That's not
gay and straight and anything in between. Well, not anything in between. Gay and straight do not apply to them because it relies on gender. And as celestial beings, they don't have that.
But are they in love? And he's like, absolutely. Okay. Our last question, and this is what we're going to use to tie up the podcast, is what is the difference from the book and the miniseries that you like and one that you don't?
So my favorite difference, and it's probably yours too, is the ending, the swapping places.
Yes. I loved it. Yeah.
If there was going to be a deviation from the book that, is prominent, this was the best thing that they could have done. And it gives a lot of opportunity for you to see more of their dynamic. If you pay attention, you know immediately what's going on. The only way I can... It is a better version of Face Off.
Aziraphale and Crowley are playing each other how they see each other. Aziraphale is playing Crowley like really sensual and cool, and Crowley's kind of a dork.
Can I get a wahoo?
Right, can I get a wahoo?
He's a dork. He's adorkable, but he's a dork.
But Aziraphale is playing him like this cool, kind of almost icy, all right, let's get this over with. Nothing bothers me. His hand over the back of the bathtub. That's that nonchalant splashing, just splash, splash, splash. And then you have Crowley playing Aziraphale, and he's still he's still kind. It's not too late. We can be on the same side. We're both angels. And then, Gabriel just tells him to go die already. And
Aziraphale would have been genuinely hurt. But because it's Crowley,
he just kind of, you can see him swallowing.
He's not going to say anything. He's not going to say, I'm not going to say a word. Because if I open my mouth. I also love that they give you a couple different clues that are a little more obvious, and then a couple little clues that are so very subtle. People probably notice, the scenes in the bookshop and the scene with Crowley's car being back. And you probably watched it the first time and went, what? Because even if you read the book, this wasn't in the book. Mm-hmm. And then the second time going, right? I wanted to roll around on the floor cackling when I watched that the second time and saw the tartan on Crowley's collar. I'm like, really? Really?
Tartan is fashionable. I've told you this once, I've told you 1,000 times.
Because it's what Aziraphale thinks. He thinks Crowley's fashionable, and he thinks tartan is fashionable.
Right! So duh. The one thing that absolutely amused me that was kind of a blazing example that they weren't who they were, but is also a little more subtle if you don't really get into the character's headspace, is that Aziraphale is not totally all on his ice cream when Crowley gives it to him. Mm-hmm. And when you see Crowley react to Aziraphale being captured, it just wings the popsicle and headcanon hits a duck. But the fact that Aziraphale is just kind of looking around grumpily, okay, I've got an ice cream cone in my hand now. That is are you kidding me? Are you honestly telling me?
In front of Aziraphale and he's not eating it. What's wrong with you?
Shame on you, Crowley. You could at least pretend.
Least favorite thing?
Yeah.
Least favorite thing is a couple bits in the confrontation of them.
Yay!
Are we on the same page again?
Yes, we are.
The them face up against the horsemen. And this is one of the bits that I really liked in the book because my siblings and I did kind of similar stuff. We had epic adventures like the them did. And you improvise weapons. You have sticks or swords, and you have, whatever junk you find lying around. In the book, the them have improvised weapons from their adventures that they use against the horsemen. In the miniseries, after the first defeat, which is war, her sword is left behind, and they pass around the sword and kind of wave it in the general direction, kind of tap tap, and I was a little disappointed, and the more I thought about it, the more it kind of hurt a little bit that they didn't still have that.
It felt like It Chapter 2 when it was supposed to be It Chapter 1. So, It Chapter 1, they're kids, and they're going in, and in the book, they go in with their childhood treasures, weaponry, and it's because they believe and they have imagination. In the second half of It Chapter 2, specifically the movie, they defeat him with power of word. That's what they did in the miniseries version, is they ended up defeating them with the power of words and the belief behind those words instead of actual weapons. And while that sounds really powerful, it ends up being kind of underwhelming.
The other half of that section of movie, that episode that bothered me, was the visual showing up of Satan. One, he does not in the book actually make it up himself.
Adam literally shifts the world with his hand. Like, he bends down and he makes a half circle, and with his palm he literally shifts the world so that where Satan was going to come up, his dad in a car comes out.
In the miniseries, they end with a plume of smoke where Satan was, and his dad pulls up in the car and goes, "Son, you are in so much trouble," right? Waggle finger. But in between those bits, in the miniseries, they actually have a very badly CGI'd, very beautifully voice acted.
I wouldn't say very badly CGI'd, because that's like Jaws 3.
I didn't watch any of the Jaws.
That's okay, you don't have to. It's bad.
But
Sharknado! Anyway.
That's one of the things that we talked about following it up is it's nigh impossible to have a satisfying personification of God or the devil. They are so huge in what they are that seeing any physical representation of them is, at least to some extent, going to be a bit of a letdown.
And in my notes earlier on, one of the first things that I said, because Satan comes over the radio to talk with Crowley, which was his idea, by the way. And he's like, he thought it would be great, because, cell phones and stuff, but they don't know things, so they just interrupt whatever he's listening to. That I liked that you didn't get to see that it was just Satan's voice and it's just God's voice. And then we get to see him. And I'm like...
I wish so much they had let the kids fight with kid weapons. And I wish so much that you didn't actually get to see. Have him talk. You can keep the lines in. You can have him shouting up through the ground as he comes up. But don't show him to me.
Actually, what I would have preferred, shockingly, is that we do get to see him, but rearrange some things a little bit. Because this whole thing is a spat between heaven and hell, yeah? Yeah. The whole thing is a spat between heaven and hell, and just because the horsemen are defeated doesn't necessarily mean that heaven and hell can't do things, because Gabriel and Beelzebub come down and tell Adam that he can still keep doing it. He can still keep things rolling.
Keep going.
It's the horsemen being defeated doesn't mean that Armageddon's over. Come on, we've been waiting for this. Yeah, right. So what I think would have been an interesting twist is that, okay, you have the big explosion, you have the big column, you have the big shadow of this huge thing roar, and Crowley's like, he's coming up and he's pissed, and then out of the smoke comes a guy. It could be like, because they've got Lucifer tying into writers and stuff like that. They've got Lucifer the show, so have a guy come out, deliver similar lines, except instead of where's my rebellious son, I shall smite thee, him go, chip off the old block.
Yeah, I can really appreciate you, following in my footsteps as far as rebelling against your father goes, but we really need to get a move on.
No. Gabriel comes down. That's when Gabriel comes down and is like, you finally show up. So you've got Lucifer, and he's there. And you've got Gabriel, and they're about to fight. And you can hear the rumblings of armies up and down and whatnot. And Adam still, with word, stops everything. But says something like, you two have to get along. Or...
You're gonna play a different game now.
You're gonna play a different game now. Or, something like that. So that it doesn't feel, quite so empty.
You could have a different creative solution, because for me, that's the crux of Adam. For being the son of the destroyer, for his purpose being a destroyer himself, most of what he does with his childhood is create. He creates things in his room that you see all over in the miniseries. He creates adventures for his friends to do. And he even says, it's a full-time job just coming up with games for the other three to play.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that this supposed harbinger of destruction is spending almost all of his free time creating. And for him to just create himself another solution that nobody would have thought of.
Yeah.
It is really great. And as beautiful as that scenario sounds, I think it might be a little too much deviation from the book for Neil to have felt comfortable with it.
Yeah, I know.
But I still kind of wish you don't actually get to see.
Yeah. If I had a choice between the two, I would rather have not seen him. But Potato. And with the other way, you could still totally have them, because just because they have to be at peace doesn't mean they have to be at peace with Aziraphale and Crowley, and they can still just, try and roast them.
Right.
Well, that's the last question. Personally, I think that this is definitely worth the watch. If you are not sensitive to religious themes or the LGBTQ plus community, and whereas it's not strictly stated in anything, again, if you're sensitive to it, you'll be like the people that protested it could be taken off of Netflix.
I'm sorry. It's going to amuse me for months to come that they complain to Netflix about Good Omens instead of, Amazon
Prime.
It's just...
Oh, man. The more you know. It's worth the watch. I definitely give this more credit than other people who have reviewed it give it. But that's partially because I am a little more attached to the source material and the people behind it.
Yeah.
So, like me, as far as a book adaptation is concerned, this is top tier. As far as watching is concerned, if you like things that fall in this genre of BBC miniseries type things, it's also top tier. But you kind of have to have a taste for that ice cream.
I grew up watching a lot of BBC and a lot of miniseries and a lot of that kind of humor, and for that, as many as I've seen, for that, this is definitely the best.
Yeah.
It's just maybe it doesn't have the best CGI.
Maybe it doesn't have the raining fish.
And it doesn't have absolutely every single scene from the book in it. Even
like the other horsemen.
Right. Even though I love the idea of the other horsemen. Also, if you're that kind of person, and I'm that kind of person, I love my cameos. Neil shows up somewhere in the miniseries. So you gotta keep an eye out, but he's in there.
And with that, we're going to wrap up the podcast. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, tell your friends, leave comments. We love comments.
Love comments.
Next month is Comic Book Month, so stay tuned on that, and we will see you guys next time.
Later.